Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Square of Self-Love. And it is I, Dr. Square, your self-love doctor, and I'm glad to be back. All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning in for another episode of Square of Self-Love. If you are a new listener, welcome. I hope you enjoy it. These are all of my shenanigans. And really, if you are here, that just tells me that you love the shenanigans just as much as I do. So this is a safe space. I am Dr. Square, your self-love doctor. And for those who don't know me, I am Kiatana Square, a first-year psychiatry resident. And I'm on my own journey of self-love. And I created this podcast because I believe that my transparency paired with my passion for mental health and medicine can help people who can relate. Or, anybody who just wants to grow alongside somebody who's being super honest about the process of gaining and regrowing and strengthening their self-love. So I'm pretty excited about today's episode because we're going to talk about something close to home for me, and that's going to be the connection between self-love and stress. This is definitely one of those areas that I'm still working on personally, and I know I'm not alone. Let's just say that. If you don't already follow me, what are you doing? But head over to Instagram and find me at square.of.self.love. And the link in my bio will take you to all of my platforms, including TikTok and YouTube, even though I still need to be more engaging on those. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. And please, please, please leave me a 5-star review. Or let me know if something in this episode speaks to you, because of course that's going to help others find this lovely podcast. And lastly, stay tuned for the end of the episode for our multiple choice poll. And I love hearing how each episode connects with you all personally. So please, 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 comment. And like I said, leave that review. Let me know how I'm doing. So without further ado, let's hop into it. So today's episode is called Stress and Self-Love, Listening to the Body. And I really want to dive into kind of just the physical manifestations of stress and how that might reflect the quality of self-love you're giving yourself and how we can work on strengthening that. This is not a bash session, as none of my episodes are. And of course, I'm not giving medical advice, but I really just want to kind of break it down. April is Stress Awareness Month. And so I feel like, why not? Like literally, I'm a psychiatry resident. This is a mental health focused month. I love this opportunity to talk about it with you guys, and it applies because self-love. So for my new listeners, we have a pretty structured format. Usually I explain it, but I'm not really going to do much explaining today, so I do apologize. But it's pretty, straightforward. We start off with affirmations, and I like to repeat each affirmation a couple times just to give you guys kind of time to digest and really break it apart. We do 4 affirmations and it'll only be 2.5 minutes. And if that's not your vibe, you're welcome to skip ahead. But I really appreciate affirmations. They've really helped me. And when I do have people listen to them, I think it can be helpful, obviously if you're not driving or doing something that requires you to like focus or, use your hands, whatever. But I think it's really helpful if you can sit with a journal and kind of just like jot down, the affirmations that feel to really resonate with you. And, you can revisit those, or you can just kind of talk about how they make you feel. So if you haven't gotten the gist, this is low-key like a therapy podcast. So hopefully it's beneficial for you in that way. Without further ado, let's get into our affirmations. My body speaks to me with wisdom, not weakness. My body speaks to me with wisdom, not weakness. My body speaks to me with wisdom, not weakness. Tension is not failure. It's a signal that I need care. Tension is not failure. It's a signal that I need care. Tension is not failure. It's a signal that I need care. I can trust my body to tell me the truth about what I need. I can trust my body to tell me the truth about what I need. I can trust my body to tell me the truth about what I need. Listening to my body is an act of radical self-love. Listening to my body is an act of radical self-love. Listening to my body is an act of radical self-love. Outstanding, everyone. I love that part. Honestly, it just sets a tone. You'll listen to me fangirl in every episode about that section, by the way. But let's talk about our opening question. And so our opening question for this episode is going to be, when was the last time your body tried to get your attention, and did you listen? And so our first segment that goes along with today's episode, which is titled, What is My Body Trying to Tell Me? Physical signs of strength and self-love responses. So, I mean, like, that title alone just like speaks for itself. Like, as a physician, I am constantly amazed with the ways that stress, mental health, and physical wellness really do correlate. And it's amazing how the body retains all of these things. And so, this has been a big buzz recently in social media, and I feel like everyone is pretty much aware that we physically manifest much of our mental wellness. However, it's just so amazing as I was going through medical school to learn just how much stress and anxiety and depression and all of these psychiatric ailments really do manifest physically. And what I'll be describing today has been referred to as allostatic overload. And so allostatic load is essentially the cumulative effects that chronic stress has on mental and physical health. And so that's essentially that, wear and tear on the body occurs based on life events and environmental stressors. However, when events happen that people aren't really able to cope with, or they don't really have the capacity to cope with, that can be referred to as allostatic overload. And that's more of what I'm talking about. It's going to be that state of heightened emotional, and it also refers to physical stress, but more so I'm really describing the emotional aspect. But it's kind of just living in that heightened emotional state that leads to the body's inability to really adapt. And that is a good setup for a lot of various, pathology and diagnosis for a lot of the symptoms that a lot of people really recognize, and it's unfortunate that it gets to the point where, you have these chronic stressors, you have kind of this lifestyle that doesn't really, I'll talk about it later in the episode, but like our society is not one that really allows much flexibility in a healthy lifestyle. You have to really be intentional about the type of lifestyle you have and how you want to live your life in a way that is helpful for your health. And of course, even to have that flexibility is a luxury. And so there's a lot of things, that I don't want to overlook as far as just like the day-to-day challenges that people may face. I don't want to dilute that. I don't want to make it seem like, it's possible for everyone to do, just make this quick shift. No, this is a very intentional thing that people have to do. And it's not easy, but that's why I have platforms like this. And that's why I try to encourage people as much as I can. So, and it's unfortunate that so many physical ailments also too have psychiatric components. And so all of this to say, I really do feel so attached to this point in this topic. And so I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. But let's get into our first, what I call cornerstone, because it's a square. Get it? Yeah. So we're going to get into our first cornerstone, which is tension and tightness, the armor we wear. Okay. I love that. I literally thought I snapped, but do go on. So let's talk about physical tension. So tight shoulders, clenched jaw, shallow breathing. These are all ways that our bodies brace itself when they're under relentless stress. And it's like our nervous system just doesn't feel safe. Our intuition, dare I say, just doesn't feel at ease. And it puts us in a subtle state of defense. And what's awful about this is that we often ignore these signals because they've become so normalized. We think, in some cases, we even feel like this is a sign that my hard work is paying off. I'm doing the right thing. I'm not, working hard enough if I'm not tense or stressed, right? Which is an unrealistic standard, but we're gonna work through that, okay? So I just want to put it out there that tension is not random. It's our body's way of saying, hey, something's not right? Like if we have to think about our ancestral fight or flight responses, we are not meant to live in a state of constant fight or flight. That's very unsustainable, unrealistic. And yet we have lifestyles and our society kind of requires that level of attention and focus and commitment when it comes to various things in our lives. And this is not medical advice, right? I'm not giving medical advice throughout this episode, but I really, and in none of my podcast episodes am I giving, personalized medical advice, but this is well documented. Like everyone, this, that chronic tightness in muscles can lead to headaches, neck pain, back pain, poor sleep, slow digestion, excessive weight gain. These are very well studied phenomenons, and all of this is very available, if you go online and look for it. For example, a 2023 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that individuals who acknowledged their body's stress signals and responded with self-compassion had significantly lower muscle tension and better autonomic nervous system regulation. And so autonomic nervous system in the medical world, and translating it to a more common way of thought, is just that fight or flight, right? And it's very unrealistic to maintain life at the constant fight or flight mode. That's exhausting for the body, and we know that, but yet we live our lives constantly under stress. And I know you're probably listening to this like, duh girl, but if I could turn it off, if I knew how to turn it off, if I knew how to calm down my life and not constantly live in stress, don't you think I would do that? I agree. And that's why you're listening to this episode. And that's what we're going to talk about. So in this episode, I really want to help you guys kind of just identify, especially for this first point, what are the things that cause you to be tense, right? Like, what is that tension? How can we help you recognize that tension? And then later in the episode, we're going to talk about something that can help kind of just acknowledge and soothe when it comes to all of this. But first, self-reflective question set, because every main point that I do will have self-reflective questions. This is kind of like your therapy moment, right? So let's think about this. What parts of my body are always tight or sore by the end of the day? And I know for me, it's usually like my traps or like my upper neck, right? And I really do, I mean, my shoulders, I talk about this all the time. My shoulders are for no reason, just like unnecessary broad, but whatever. I know I keep my stress there, and I know, throughout the day, I'll kind of restructure my posture just to kind of offset that. And really, it really does help. I feel like it gives me a little energy boost. It gives me something to focus on other than what's probably stressing me out. And it really does kind of just like reshape how I'm feeling. And I've noticed, when I more consistently think about it, I actually have like better, I guess less like pains, because I'm at the age where my body starts to hurt. And so I just have less pains. I also carry a backpack. And so I have to be mindful that, even having too much in my bag and then carrying my bag around all day, that's also going to contribute to that. But I'm definitely more intentional now, just like kind of reposturing myself, because I know that's where I get tight. And where I can be sore at the end of the day. And so think about that. What parts of your body are retaining that stress and you're more often, sore or tight at the end of the day or even in the morning? And then our second self-reflective question is, am I carrying weight that I haven't acknowledged emotionally? And this is really important because a lot of times we are tending to those physical symptoms because, symptoms are a way for the body to get our attention. But we are much more in tune with those physical symptoms than we are those mental symptoms. And so just thinking about, what are the things you ruminate on throughout the day? What are the things that you kind of have to tuck away and distract yourself from, but you always kind of get back to? And when you get back to it, you feel this, oh my goodness. I forgot about that for, a split second. And at one moment I was at peace. And then it came back to my mind that I still have to deal with this. I call these my looming thoughts, my looming things, the thing that is kind of over my head all the time. And I kind of have to use different distractors to get away from it. And so think about what you're carrying weight of that you haven't necessarily acknowledged emotionally. And I can just say my own experience with this point in particular is a few months ago, I had just finished a extremely mentally exhausting rotation, and I was chronically sleep deprived, eating terribly, and honestly just in survival mode for like an entire month. And when I finally got to my vacation week, I thought I'd be, refreshed right away. And instead it was like my body completely crashed. And I felt sick, but it was more like just fatigue. I'd never really felt full on fatigue. My body was just tired. And it was like my body was just holding on just to get, to the finish line. And once I crossed it, it was just completely out the window. And so that's been my own personal experience. And of course, they say residency's tough, but oh my God, like just some rotations are more manageable than others. But those ones that are just tough are just tough. But I know, I'm not alone in that. I know it's not just residency that gets people like that. So, feel free to leave your review and let me know what it is that you feel like you really hold on for, like your body or your body response when you've been just living in survival mode. But okay, let's get to segment 2. Segment 2 is going to be a gem for sure. Fatigue and brain fog, when the body shuts the door. So brain fog is definitely, and fatigue for that matter, is definitely a symptom that we talk about in psychiatry for several different diagnoses. But brain fog in and of itself is a symptom of the mind, similar to, a muscle being exhausted. Your mind is also working in that fashion. And so stress doesn't just live in our muscles. It also shows up in our cognition, right? That's a big word for essentially saying the functions of the mind. Yes, that's how we'll kind of portray that. And when we've been in go mode for too long, our brain starts to shut the door to preserve energy. And that looks like fatigue, trouble concentrating, slow thinking, and sometimes even emotional numbness or emotional kind of just like dysregulation, right? You might just feel sad and you don't really know why, or you might just feel irritated and you really can't put a pin on why. There are times when I might even, tell my friends or tell a colleague or whatever, hey, I'm sorry, like, I think I'm just really annoyed today. Like, I'm just really on edge. And I've really worked to like kind of be self-aware about that, but not everybody can do that. And there's research to back this up too. And I do like to drop like gems of research. That's a part of my life. And so I think it's helpful. A 2022 review in neurobiology of stress noted that chronic stress impairs memory and cognitive flexibility by impacting the prefrontal cortex. Basically, your brain is trying to protect you from further depletion by slowing you down. Literally, your brain is like, let's take a minute, take a second, let's take a breath, and let's just regain kind of everything that we've been exhausting. And so, there's good data that shows that chronic stress increases your likelihood for things like dementia and cognitive decline sooner. And so just knowing that and really being mindful of how important this is on a day-to-day basis, being mindful of the exercise you get in a way to decrease your risk of, cardiovascular disease. Very similar, right? So finding a routine that really helps you kind of de-stress, bring that stress back down. Maybe you can't bring it to zero, right? But any effort you can make to just kind of give yourself a break. And I know it's hard, like easier said than done, but having that self-love and that compassion for yourself and being patient with yourself really does make a difference, as we learned in our previous research study. But the self-reflective question for our second cornerstone, fatigue and brain fog when the body shuts the door, is going to be, am I forcing productivity when my body is asking for rest? And truthfully, that feels personal. I definitely do that. Even to the point where, somebody can ask me, oh, how was your day? And I measure it in means of like, was my day productive? But this podcast is for everyone, right? We listen and we don't judge is what the girls are saying now. So, even I am a listener. And then my next self-reflective question is, do I feel guilty for needing breaks? And I know a lot of people who are those kind of hard hitters, heavy workers, always on the go. Oftentimes those are the people who feel responsible for if things weren't going right, or they take on a lot of work at home, at work. They're kind of the person holding everything together. But sometimes things just have to break apart. Sometimes things just fall apart, and it's not your fault. And you really have to understand that we are put into systems that are not reliant on our ability to show up and exhaust ourselves. The only system we are responsible for, in life, is to make sure this body is well running and well functioning. And I say that because, and I know you guys are like, well, I have kids, I have this. If your body, if you are not functioning well, you can't show up for anything else you might really care about. You know what I mean? So it's not so much that I'm saying, the only thing that matters is you. No, but you can't show up in half the capacity you could for others if you aren't even taking care of yourself. You see what I mean? So in order to really deliver your best self and all that you're able to do for others and for this world, you have to take a second to prioritize your wellness and not feel guilty about needing a break. Needing a break is like needing water, needing food, needing sleep. You have to do it. And the sad truth is, if you don't take that break, your body will do it for you. And how that might look, we don't know. But I work in a profession that literally is people, getting to the point where their body had to speak up. Now, I'm not saying, they didn't listen to the body in the time being, but that's just what happens, right? Symptoms present themselves. And a lot of these symptoms are, I had this for quite some time, but I just couldn't take the time off, And I'm not saying hospitalization is the next step, but you gotta listen to your body. You have to pay attention to the signs. You know this body better than anybody in the world, right? So if nothing else, listen to it, pay attention to the signs, take the breaks you need. And people are going to say what they need to say, what they want to say, however that looks. But at the end of the day, you have to show up for you when no one else can, right? And I can say just a couple weeks ago, I needed a mental health day. I had been pushing hard. I'd been studying for step 3 on my off days. I had meetings. I'd taken up tutoring as my side hustle because social media is definitely not paying me. I'm not consistent enough, but not yet, one day. But I was just on empty. And I remembered not being able to do basic math, in days leading up to the break. And though math has never been my strong suit, but it was worse than usual. And I finally gave myself a full day to catch up on my life. And I felt like I could think clearly again. I had a really big conference coming up and I was just like overwhelmed. And I kept voicing that I was overwhelmed. And I was like, I'm not necessarily in a space where I should feel overwhelmed. What is this issue? And I just had to recognize, look, I think I need a day. And I used it. And I am so grateful for it. I really am. And so lastly, we're going to talk about our last cornerstone, which is gut feelings. When stress lives in the stomach, okay? And again, this is all over social media, right? Everybody's talking about how the gut is connected to, the mind. And when I was in medical school, I'd learned various things about how certain bacteria influence, mental wellness, like gut bacteria, how certain hormones, they're, all hormones, the body is a closed system. I have my own feelings about social media medical advice because I feel like a lot of it is just buzzwords and not enough is data. I don't know. I don't want to, it's a hairy subject, but my point is there is very prevalent data that shows that, gut wellness and gut health is very much so linked to stress and mental wellness. And there's actually a subset of psychiatry that focuses on the connection between GI and mental health and psychiatric diagnosis and pathologies and things like that. So all of that to say, the gut is often called the second brain. And for a reason, stress can affect GI function and it leads to bloating, nausea, cramp, loss of appetite, just like delayed GI function. So like basically slowing down the time it takes for your GI to break food down. And on the flip side, it can also cause emotional eating. And this happens due to dysregulation of the gut-brain axis. And most people are familiar with, specific hormones like cortisol or insulin or, being mindful of, your estrogen being something that impacts kind of your physique or your wellness or how you might feel. But I try not to specify, one particular hormone just because we have so many hormones, number one, and they all work in harmony, right? So they work in balance, and it's not necessarily something that you can, target one hormone and focus to bring that down. I think that's a way more like you're kind of chasing a rabbit, but I think we all are aware of just the ways to take on a healthy lifestyle, some of the bad habits we have, and even to the point where it's like, especially when it comes to GI health, portion control. I know that was something I struggled with for a long time, supplementing what fills you up versus, what tastes good. And sometimes, I recognize I'll have cravings. I will fall victim quickly to my cravings. But if it's a matter of, I just need to be full, what will fill me up and, not kind of yield to that, craving that I have for something sweet and chocolatey or something greasy and fatty. I mean, when I want a burger, it's a feeling and I'll be like, I just want a burger, So just being mindful of that. I try, like I said, I try not to like highlight specific hormones because I don't think, most people really benefit from, I feel like it's a more of a fear monger thing if I just bring it to you. And I don't really have any guidance on, how to mitigate that. Now, if you do have, of course, like a hormonal imbalance or anything like that, I recommend you see an endocrinologist or someone who specializes in hormone balance because that can be helpful if it's a specific, thing that you're kind of dealing with. And, that's a much more complex thing than just, me sitting here talking at you about one specific hormone. Like, no type of formal education needs to teach you this. We know kind of what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And just being mindful of that and trying to mix in little pieces at a time, right? Don't go on some crazy diet. Don't make a huge life shift. You want to do something that's sustainable, and that's really the goal. And a study published in Neurogastroenterology and Motility in 2021 demonstrated that stress alters both gut motility and microbiota composition, leading to symptoms that many people dismiss as just nerves. However, the truth is your gut is telling you something, okay? And I cannot stress that enough. I know for myself, well, let's get to our self-reflective question, and then I'll talk about my own personal experience. But first self-reflective question is going to be, do I notice changes in my appetite or digestion when I'm anxious? And this is big. I know for me, I can relate. I don't know if anybody else can. I know when I'm stressed, my digestion slows for sure. My appetite, I'll get to, but yeah, this one is definitely something I can relate to. And then our next question is going to be, what messages might my gut be trying to send me? I'm not going to tell you what my gut's telling me because I already know, and I've read myself enough in this episode. So, but I will say, from my own personal experience, I know when I was in medical school, I stress eat. I started to, actually, let's take it back. In undergrad, I stress ate, okay? I am a stress eater, okay? That's what I do. And I recognize it now, and I'm very mindful about what I'm eating. But even still, I'll catch myself giving up, throwing in the towel, and getting some junk, right? And I know in medical school, I would buy, oh my goodness, this is so awful. I would buy one of those personal sized birthday cakes from Price Chopper. If you aren't from where I'm from, you would not know what this is. But I would buy like one of those circular personal sized birthday cakes. And anytime I was overwhelmed, I'd just take a bite or two. And that little cake usually lasts me like a week. Hopefully, right? Like 9 times out of 10, it was going to last me a week. Sometimes it might last me 5 days, whatever. And it wasn't that I was hungry, but I was overwhelmed. And the cake was my coping tool, It was this sugary, chemical-based, frosted stress reliever. And I was like, yep, give me some of that. And, it got me through some tough nights where I was up studying. But it's also a sign that my body was craving comfort, right? Because my brain was overstimulated. And as a result, I gained crazy weight during medical school. But all of that to say, if you know that your GI and your mental wellness are connected, then you can probably piece together that not only was I stress eating, but then my GI was slowed down, right? And so it's just further really emphasizing that point that, this is all connected. I say this all the time, but, the body is a closed system. And when one thing is off kilter, it's going to throw everything else off. And that's not to say that, weight is specifically based in mental wellness. And, we know that as well, right? There's various hormones involved in manipulation of weight. And I don't want, you to zoom in on that point in particular, but just highlighting the emphasis that, when you are mentally unwell, you have other body systems involved that should be, you should be mindful of. And so I always want to include a therapy tip. And this is something that you can do just to kind of be mindful of how you're carrying stress, because I don't want to bring attention to this without giving you something actionable, right? And so we're going to talk about a body scan plus somatic self-love, right? This is a tool that helps. It's in 2 minutes, okay? And what you do is you start from the top of your head and slowly check in with every area of your body, okay? And you're going to ask, where do I feel tension? What does this area need? So stretching, stillness, breathing, or movement. And what does it need to hear? And you're going to pair this with an affirmation, okay? Like, you don't have to carry this alone. Okay. Something that really just kind of brings this tension out, right? And gives you a sense of calm. Okay. And I want you to do this regularly to build kind of strength in that communication and that discussion that you and your body are having, but also building trust with your body. And it really shifts your default from ignoring discomfort to honoring it, right? And being attentive about it or to it. And really, this is going to be something that takes time. It'll take practice, but you can definitely incorporate maybe in your morning, just when you wake up. You can also incorporate it before you go to bed. You can incorporate it when you're about to leave work. Well, you probably want to get the heck out of work. But maybe as soon as you get to work, do a quick, body scan, a somatic self-love. I love that. And really just kind of check in, and it'll give you insight so much sooner, when something's going off or something's wrong or something's awry, because you have that sense of, I know my body, I know this is abnormal, okay? And I really hope you appreciate this episode. That brings it to an end, honestly. This is a really good episode. I'm trying to have shorter episodes, so we'll see if I can really honor that. And of course, we have our multiple choice poll for you all to fill out. But before you do that, if you haven't already followed me on Instagram, go do it now, please. At @square_of_self_love. You can use the link in my bio to find other platforms where I'm at. TikTok, YouTube, all the places. And please, please, please subscribe wherever you're listening, either Apple or Spotify podcasts, and leave a review. Let me know how I did on this episode. I'll give you a second because I know you're doing it, because I trust y'all. I gave you a lot there. It was like a whole list. And then lastly, we're going to do our multiple choice poll. So this episode, we're talking about, what physical signs of stress do you notice first? Okay. A, headaches or jaw tension. B, stomach issues. C, fatigue and low energy. Or D, muscle tightness or pain. And I really hope this episode helped you guys out. Of course, I love talking about this. I feel like it's so relevant. It's so necessary. It's so important. And I feel like a lot of people discuss this point, but I think especially when I am, a physician, I feel like I have a very unique opportunity to talk about it from a medical perspective, and give you some data and research that backs it all up. So I hope to talk to you again if you'll re-listen to this episode or listen to another one. But overall, see you later. And of course, don't forget to love yourself.